There was some surprise when the Social Metrics Commission (SMC) unveiled a new measure of poverty last month. No shock, perhaps, that it found more people living below the breadline than previously thought, but a degree of curiosity that the chair of the rigorously non-partisan body was Philippa Stroud, Tory peer, ex-advisor to the former Work and Pensions Secretary Iain Duncan Smith, and champion of controversial welfare reforms that many consider to be fueling Britain's poverty epidemic. Stroud, a former homelessness charity worker, worked closely with Duncan Smith at the Department for Work and Pensions (DWP) from 2010 to 2015. While there, she helped to launch Universal Credit, the centerpiece of a thick bundle of reforms pushed out as billions were stripped from the Social Security budget. "The reason I went into government was to introduce Universal Credit," she says. There were cuts to disability benefits, the benefit cap was introduced, in came the bedroom tax, the two-child benefits limit, and the benefit freeze. Labour's child poverty targets were acrimoniously abolished amid accusations that ministers were trying to avoid scrutiny of the impact of austerity. She may not have been the most obvious choice as head of an independent, politically neutral inquiry into poverty. And yet the SMC report, thrashed out over more than 2 years by an eclectic and mainly expert group of commissioners, appears to have won over the skeptics. Its proposed measurement, offering a more sophisticated analysis of who's in poverty and how deeply, seems to have achieved a rare degree of political consensus. "The commissioners were quite honest with me. They said when we started out, we weren't sure whether to trust you or not," admits Stroud. "We are in a light, airy basement room of the Legatum Institute, the right-wing think tank she runs, which is based, somewhat incongruously given our subject matter, in an elegant Mayfair townhouse. But as we went on this journey together and we really did grow in trust, we really grew to understand that everybody in the room felt as passionately about the lived experience of poverty," Philippa Stroud said. Up the Center for Social Justice think tank with Iain Duncan Smith in 2003, photographed Reuters. The distrust stemmed not just from Stroud's political career but from a deep ideological divide over the causes of poverty itself. While the left held that lack of financial resources was the crucial factor, for the right, poverty was driven by lived experience, family breakdown, educational failure, addiction and unemployment. Stroud says that when she was in Whitehall, both sides would privately admit the other had a point, but in public the debate about poverty measures was bitter and polarized. The commission was an attempt to cut through the impasse. "It was clear to me that if you could create a safe enough space where trust could grow, we would be able to have a really comprehensive conversation around the nature of very real poverty in the UK, and how you could capture and measure that," says Stroud. "It just needed to be safe enough and slow enough to have that conversation." The SMC concluded that poverty was about both resources and lived experience, although it points out that there is little data on the latter. Was this a compromise? I don't think anybody came out feeling they had compromised. I think we all came out feeling we had grown. The key focus is money, however, although this is expressed as total resources. Income matters. The existing measure of poverty is set at 60% of the UK median income, currently £27,300, but so do unavoidable living costs such as rent, childcare and the extra costs of disability. A family might have a reasonable income, but find itself in poverty because paying high rent means it is unable to afford basic living necessities. The SMC found that more children live in poverty than estimated under existing measures, 4.5 million compared to 4.1 million, and fewer pensioners, 1.5 million compared to 1.9 million. Stroud became a social activist almost by accident. As a student, she expected to go into international banking. That changed dramatically when, after graduating in the mid-1980s, she volunteered for a charity working with drug addicts in Hong Kong. On her return to the UK, she set up and ran homelessness projects, an experience that was to lead her, by the turn of the century, to politics. "I started to realize that after 17 years, I could literally give all my days to this and only have supported a handful of people. I started asking, how do we start addressing the drivers of social breakdown on a national level? Stroud says she was not especially political at the time, although she admits she is more naturally conservative in outlook. Her experience on the poverty front line was attractive to a Tory party seeking to detoxify its nasty party reputation and become more open to fresh thinking on social issues. Philippa Stroud did not back George Osborne when the then-Chancellor took the axe to £3 billion of universal credit work allowances in the 2015 budget. Photograph Matt Carty, PA. Stroud set up the Centre for Social Justice think tank with Duncan Smith in 2003. Out of that came the Breakdown Britain report, 2006. Its picture of social decay was taken up enthusiastically by David Cameron, and Breakthrough Britain, 2007, which challenged the left's simple fixation with a single poverty line, and paved the way, ultimately, for the bitter battles over child poverty measurements half a decade later. With peace now seemingly breaking out, Stroud's vision is to make the SMC a kind of institute for fiscal studies, IFS, for poverty, an authoritative organization whose pronouncements will carry influence in Whitehall and in the media. In government, she noticed that economic budget decisions would be informally stress-tested in a "what would the IFS say" way. What I saw missing, says Stroud, was the corresponding voice on the social policy side. Ultimately, she says, the point of the new poverty measure is to highlight pathways out of deprivation. The pension story. The SMC findings that far fewer pensioners were in poverty shows what is possible, says Stroud. It shows that with sustained effort to really invest in a group of people, you can really move the dial. The contrast with high poverty levels in working-age families, particularly those with at least one disabled person, or households headed by a single parent, both of which have lost out badly through welfare cuts, is also striking. Would she switch investment from pensions to working-age benefits? I don't think we should be playing those generational trade-off games, she says, but invest in both. Stroud is reluctant to be drawn on the benefit cuts she helped oversee. It is well documented there were big battles behind the scenes. It is no secret that Duncan Smith and the Chancellor George Osborne did not get on. One story holds that Osborne foisted cuts on the DWP as the price of continuing with universal credit. Another is that Stroud fought bitter internal battles against huge cuts to personal independence payments for disabled people. She will only say that you don't get to choose the circumstances under which you do reform, a veiled reference to austerity cuts, and that the Chancellor taking the axe to £3 billion of universal credit work allowances in the 2015 budget was the last straw. The final set of cuts to universal credit in 2015 were not cuts that I supported. What should the government do to tackle poverty? The restoration of investment into universal credit should be the top priority, Stroud says. She insists the benefit is fit for purpose for the next critical phase of rollout to 2 million people on tax credits, despite the nervousness of Tory backbenchers and myriad warnings of imminent disaster. She says she trusts implicitly the judgment of the senior civil servant in charge of universal credit, Neil Cooling. On this, he would not say we were ready for rollout if they were not ready. On next week's budget, Stroud is clear. She wants more money for mental health, and more investment in childcare for low-income families. But ultimately, she believes, universal credit must be properly funded. The money that has been taken out of universal credit has caused the problems, but the structure of it is right. What it needs is some of that money back into it to make it the poverty-fighting tool that it might be. Patrick Butler is The Guardian's social policy editor. Curriculum by age 53. Lives, Southwest London. Family, married with one son and twin daughters. Education, St. Catherine's School, Bramley, University of Birmingham, BA French. Career 2016-present, Chief Executive, Legitum Institute. 2015-16, Chief Executive, Center for Social Justice. 2010-15, Special Advisor, Department of Work and Pensions. 2004-10, Founder and Executive Director, Center for Social Justice. 2001-04, Executive Director, Bridge Project, Birmingham. 1989-96, Founder, King's Arms Project, Night Shelter and Hostel, Bedford. 1987-89, Voluntary work in Hong Kong and Macau among addict community. Public life, made a life peer in 2015, stood as a parliamentary candidate in 2005 and 2010 general elections. Interests, travel, film, theater and brunch with her family.